My name is Mofia Piri. I'm a member of the customer success team at Durability, who are the makers of the SurveyCTO data collection platform. We really are grateful to each one of us for joining us for this event of our webinar series. We are here today to learn how to use audio computer-assisted self-interviewing, for short ACASI, to reduce social desirability bias when asking sensitive questions. Understanding how to gather accurate information on sensitive topics is crucial for good quality research. So today we have guests from ICF who have come to speak to us. ICF is a global advisory and digital services provider that helps governments, nonprofits, and businesses solve their most complex challenges, navigate change, and shape the future. We're joined by Holly Kugler, who is a research specialist. Holly, we are grateful to have you with us today. Before we get started, I just wanted to lay out a few points. Firstly, in terms of troubleshooting, I'm assuming that everyone can see my slide presentation and that you can all hear me. Please kindly just someone confirm for me in the chat that they can hear me. And then I will paste the message to the chat. The first link you will see is a web form for the webinar feedback. Okay, so I'm just going to paste this to the chat so that everybody can see this. Okay, so I've pasted something in the chat there. The first link you'll see is a web form for webinar feedback. Please provide feedback at the end of the webinar. Then there are some links there that you can use to follow through some of the resources that are being used as part of the presentation. Then if you have any questions in the course of the webinar, please use the Zoom Q&A feature. You should see a Q&A button as part of your Zoom platform, and you can use that to send your questions as they occur to you. We will have a question and answer session at the end. We can respond to those questions. And finally, this webinar is being recorded, and we will link you to the recording, the slides that are used here, and the list of links that we've shared. You will receive an email with the recording within a couple of days. Okay, then before I hand over to our guests, I'll briefly mention the Safe People and Data Initiative. The Safe People and Data Initiative has been spearheaded by the team at Durability and would like to grow it through your participation and support. We aim to look beyond technology, which we still feel is important, to focus on best practice for safe data collection, which can involve a mix of tools and methods. Would love to hear from you about how you're adapting and changing your work. If the revisions you're making to your processes fall inside the scope of the Safe Data and Safe People and Data Initiative, and if you're keen to share, please do get in touch with us. Take a look at the homepage of the initiative on our website and feel free to write to us. The initiative homepage is amongst the links that I shared in the chat. The move to phone surveying has, of course, been principally a safety measure. And in fact, not only is it safer, it is also more cost effective. At Durability, with your rise with organizations who successfully transition to phone surveying, and that some of them will be reluctant to swap back to normal coordinating the movements of hundreds of enumerators from homes and their research subjects. Having spoken about the Safe People and Data Initiative, I do want to hand over to Holly and her team so that they can share with us what they have prepared. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and Holly, you can take over.
Thanks for that. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. I'm very happy to be here today and sort of kick off this presentation. I'll share a little bit about myself and organization I work for. My name is Bart Robertson, and I work with the Global Fund to End Modern Slavery. And we commissioned ICF and Makerere University to conduct this research. And we're really excited about the study, the results, and particularly the ACASI tool that was used in the study, because it really gets at the heart of why our organization was founded and why we exist. Across the globe, we fund, test, and scale innovative approaches to combat modern slavery and human trafficking. And at the very beginning of our organization several years ago, we kind of came about with the realization that in the trafficking field, first, there was limited funding in place to address human trafficking. Secondly, the funding that did exist was rather dispersed. It was fragmented across many different smaller projects. and it often wasn't being invested in a very strategic way in a given sector or a given geography. And third, there's a real lack of critical, robust evidence in the field of modern slavery. And if you're really going to create effective programming, you need to sort of unpack the social and economic drivers that perpetuate modern slavery and allow it to persist. And for that, we as a global fund conduct prevalence studies of trafficking, forced labor, commercial sexual exploitation, various forms of modern slavery in all the geographies we operate, because we need to know the scale of their problem and the specific characteristics in each geography to address it appropriately. And as we've gone about conducting these prevalence studies in many different countries, from Bangladesh to India to Kenya to Uganda to you name it, the elephant in the room has always been social desirability bias, right? Because you're always dealing with a hidden or hard to reach population, and you're asking them extremely sensitive questions in face-to-face interviews typically. So when ICF came around and brought up this idea, how about we use ACASI? It seemed like a really innovative approach, and we said, great, let's go for it. And I'm really glad we did, because just looking at some of the results from the study already, which I won't get into too much, they're already revealing very interesting findings that tend to contradict some of the traditional views or beliefs within the field of modern slavery that weren't founded on any research or evidence. It's just kind of people's assumptions. So with that, I'd like to pass it over to Holly to explain a little bit about how to use and implement the ACASI tool, and also a bit about the findings from the study. Thanks. Over to you, Holly.
I'll start today by just giving an introduction to ICF and also this project. And then I'll talk about the motivation for the design of the project. I'll talk specifically about how we use SurveyCTO to create the form. And then I'll talk about the training of the interviewers, and more importantly, the training of the respondents. I'll say a little about the user experience and the study findings, and then I'll mention our next steps. So my name is Holly Kugler. I work for ICF. I'm a senior research specialist. ICF, as Mafi mentioned, is a global consulting services company with both public and private sector clients. We work in many fields, but the team I work on has been conducting research on child labor, forced labor, and human trafficking since 2005. So this study, oh, my video is working now. The study that I'm talking about today was funded by GFEMS, and the purpose was to measure knowledge, attitudes, and practices around CSEC, as well as to estimate the prevalence of children both at risk and engaged in CSEC. And the whole purpose was to inform programming that GFEMS is funding that's intended to reduce CSEC. This study will be conducted at 2 time points. The first was conducted in early 2021, and the next will be conducted in early 2022. We'll return to the same households and see if there's been any change. The study is implemented by Makerere University in Uganda. Our sample size was 986 households with 830 children. Most of this interview was interviewer administered, meaning the interviewer held the tablet and asked the questions and then inputted the responses. So all of the adult interview and part of the child interview was interviewer administered. However, for the very sensitive questions that we asked children, we used an audio computer assisted self-interview program. So this self-administered portion was for the questions about CSEC, questions about relationships with parents. We asked some questions about intention to migrate using this method. Asking sensitive questions in the household setting has long been a challenge. ICF does research on domestic violence, on child labor, on human trafficking, other sensitive questions. And it's often in a setting very much like in this picture, where the family is in the courtyard outside of their home, or some other kind of confined space, where it's very hard to find privacy to ask these questions. And typically what the interviewer is trained to do is to ask the respondent if they can kind of go to the side They sit next to them and quietly have, a private conversation. But this challenge that was, already a longstanding problem was really exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Because, imagine both parties are wearing masks. You're supposed to stay 6 feet apart. How can you have this quiet, private conversation? So this challenge is what motivated us to try to create this self-administered module for children to answer these questions. We encountered additional challenges in this setting. We know that most children in Karamoja, where this study took place, have low literacy levels. We knew coming into the survey that that was the case. And in fact, we found that 1/3 of the respondents aged 12 to 17 had never attended school. We were also aware that they had a low exposure to technology, low familiarity with technology. We were told that in many villages, only the village leader might have a phone. So many of the children had never touched a phone or a tablet before. So what that means in practice is that all of these things that you see on the screen, which are second nature to most of us, might be pretty meaningless to these children. They wouldn't know that the arrow means move back, move forward. They wouldn't know what this means. My 3-year-old knows that you push this button and you see Paw Patrol, but they were unlikely to know that. They wouldn't know that check means yes, X means no, possibly. It would certainly be unfamiliar with swiping, wouldn't be able to input their information using a keyboard or selecting numbers or letters. And we also know from previous research in Uganda by Makerere University that using smiley face, happy face, frowny face is challenging with children. They don't associate it with their responses the way we hoped. And this is pretty common to use these kind of faces in research in the US with children, but we knew coming in that it would be unlikely to be successful here. So with all of those challenges in mind, we were looking for a solution that would automatically advance to the next question, so wouldn't require pressing next. We wanted it to automatically play the video. We didn't want the child to have to press play. And we wanted to have minimal content on the screen so that the children really just saw what we wanted them to do, nothing else on the screen. So here I will show you an example of 2 questions. You're seeing it from the perspective of the respondent. And this is just a 1-minute video to give you a sense of how the self-interview worked.
How much do you talk to your caregivers about important things? A lot, some, not too much, not at all. Touch the green bowel if you talk to your caregivers about important things a lot. Touch the blue bowel if you talk to your caregivers about important things, some. Touch the yellow bowel if you talk to your caregivers about important things, not too much. Touch the red bowel if you talk to your caregivers about important things, not at all. Have any of your caregivers ever ridiculed you or put you down? For example, said you were stupid or useless. Touch the green drum if your answer is yes. Touch the red tree if your answer is no.
And now I can show you part of our form that we use to create this module. I thought I could go column by column to discuss how we, what we decided and why. So for the first column, the type, you'll see that we used select one almost all the way through. My initial testers, my children, were confused by the select multiple options, and it also would require teaching the respondent how to press next to go to the next question after they finished responding. So we changed all of our select multiple questions into a series of select one to solve that problem. Oh, and I meant to mention, I'm a novice SurveyCTO user. So I put this together using the SurveyCTO Support Center and also Google. So this is quite simple once you figure it out. The next column is the name, but you'll see here, you don't see a label column. I've hidden it because it's empty. I didn't want there to be any text on the screen. I didn't want to confuse non-readers. And just to note that it's allowed to be empty on the Excel version of the form, but if you're using the web version of the form, you're required to enter something in the label spot. And then for the appearance, those of you who have used SurveyCTO know that there are many options. I experimented with all of them to see which one would work best for this, this particular use. And I found that the quick compact with the numbers was best because I could make the icons very big so that it'd be easier for the children to touch. There weren't any radial buttons or check boxes that they would need to figure out how to touch the small little boxes. And it also automatically advanced to the next question after they selected their response. These columns show the media files associated with each question. So for each question, we had a sound clip. And just from trial and error, I discovered that your file name has to match exactly the file name of the actual clip, including the extension. I didn't realize at first that the files that I was receiving from the field had a different extension, a different file type than the files I was creating here. And so small problem to be resolved. And the way that we got the media files was actually WhatsApp. Our translator read the questions into her phone. She created recordings on WhatsApp and then forwarded them on to us. Here is the minimum seconds. This column makes it where the respondent cannot move forward until the minimum number of seconds has been met. And the purpose for this was to keep children from just pushing buttons and going all the way through. I wanted them to have to hear the question. So we timed it for each question so that they would not be able to select, would not be able to move forward until they had heard the whole question, including the response categories for the first time that we read out those response categories. And then this column just causes the audio to automatically play. The choices sheet was very straightforward. We have images associated with each of the response options. And you'll see here that the little feet were used if the child wanted to skip that question or move on to the next question without having a response. So I coded that as 99 because it's sort of our refused, don't know option for children. I encountered some challenges, and I'll note that these were my challenges, not necessarily platform limitations. I found it difficult to add plugins because when I tried them, it disabled the autoplay or it made the audio player visible when I wanted it to be, in the background. So I didn't use plugins except for one spot. And initially the images were displaying in all different sizes. And I found that I had to resize all the images to be the same size. And also, where you may have seen in the video, when I clicked a response, it made the outline orange. Initially, only some were turning orange, and it turned out that some had a white background and some had a transparent background. So once I made them universally have a transparent background, it was consistently turning orange when you touch it. When I was testing the program as a experienced technology user, I was accidentally swiping, going forward or backward in the questionnaire. So I found that it was possible to disable that option to swipe to move. So instead, it has forward and back buttons on the bottom of the screen. And ideally for me, I would be able to remove those as well, so that the only way to navigate through the questionnaire is through answering questions. But that's not an option right now with SurveyCTO. I also couldn't remove the 3-dot button at the top of the screen, but I did take out all of the options except for changing language back and forth between English and Karamoja. I didn't want children to be able to change things. So we worked at the initial stages to try to make our what the children see on the screen contextually appropriate. We also discussed the translation of these questions and how to word them for children at length. But what I'm talking about here is what they actually see on the screen. So we talked with social workers who work in the community where we would be doing this survey, and bounce ideas off of them with what would the buttons look like that the children might push. Initially, I was suggesting shapes like circles, triangles, squares, and they let us know that those shapes are not necessarily known universally among children, and they instead suggested that we use common objects like a drum or a bicycle or a tree. We also discussed what color words to use. As I'm sure many of you know, different languages and different cultures have different common color words that young children might know. So we made sure to use color words that they would recognize. Also noted things like, for example, in the US, green is associated with go, with yes, and red is associated with no, with stop. And that's because of our stoplights. But in this rural context with children who are unfamiliar with traffic and with stoplights, they don't have those associations with the colors. So we had to be careful with our assumptions to make sure that we were choosing things appropriate for the context. And even with all these attempts, we went into the pilot with this drum on our screen. And one of the first respondents said, "That's not a drum." It was not a Ugandan drum, apparently. So at the last minute, we switched to a Ugandan drum, which I had to make green to match the recording that we had already made. So this just reinforces the importance of testing your product before you go to the field. We had an interviewer training already planned for the survey. So for the self-administered module, we just added a training session. The study leaders explained the rationale for the module the same way I explained it to you about how children need a chance to answer these questions privately. The interviewers practiced the module themselves. They also encountered some bugs and we fixed them when they were practicing. And what we emphasized during the training is the importance of training the respondents, because we know that these children are unfamiliar with technology. This would be a new thing we're asking them to do. And so if we want good data, we really need to teach the children what we're asking them to do. So this was emphasized strongly in the training. And within the interview, the child interview, there were actually 3 different methods that we used to try and teach children how to respond to these questions. So first, during the interviewer administered part of the survey, the interviewer had a show card that had the 2 main types of response categories that we used in the self-administered portion. And so when the interviewer asked a question for 4 different questions, they said, on this card, the green drum means yes, and the red tree means no. After I read the question, touch your answer on this card. Do you think kids your age who attend school will make more money later in life? Touch the green drum if your answer is yes. Touch the red tree if your answer is no. So the children were supposed to touch the paper card to show their answer. And the purpose for this was to give them some practice associating a response with an image before they were asked to do it on the tablet. So they did that for 4 different questions. And then right before they started the training module, the self-administered module, they were shown the show card again. And this time the interviewer did a little training. They said, This is what the screen is going to look like. This button, it's hard for me to see it backwards. This button plays the audio again. This button you can use if you want to just go to the next question. This means yes, this means no. And then they did a little quiz. So, now, what do you push if you want to hear the question again? What do you push if you don't want to answer? And the children were expected to understand it before they moved into the using the tablet version. Once they open the tablet, they would hand the headphones to the child, get the child set up with their headphones. The child would have the tablet in their hands. And then the first few questions that the child heard were actually training questions. So first they heard a reminder of how to hear a question repeated. Next, they had some practice questions where they were told the response to select. So for this one, they were told to press yes, and they couldn't move forward until they hit yes. We had constraints on the within the form that only allowed them to move forward once they selected the response they were being asked to select. And then they had a practice question where we asked them what they really think. They were asked, how much do you like dogs? And they had to select their answer here. And then they were reminded how to skip a question if they didn't want to answer by pressing the feet, walk to the next question. We had 798 respondents to the self-administered module. Of those, 266 were boys and 532 were girls. Our sample overall was skewed towards females. In the household, a lot of the boys were out doing income generating activities or caring for cattle. So even though we revisited the households, I believe 3 times, we were still had more female children than male children in our final sample. So in the actual report, our actual findings are weighted to reflect this, to mitigate this challenge. So we had very few refusals for the self-administered module. 22 children declined to participate, and that was less than 3% of our sample. We did not collect formal data on the user experience because of our timeline, because of COVID, because Karamoja is very far from the capital where our team was based. However, we did collect information from the interviewers about the experience of the children. They told us that most children were very excited to use the tablet and the headphones. They felt that most children were attending to the module, that they were paying attention and listening and selecting their answers thoughtfully. They said a few were more interested in just pushing buttons and playing with the device. Similarly, most took about 20 minutes to complete the module, but some took a lot longer. And those took the interviewer a gentle reminder to finish up before they could hand back the tablet. We have a full report with our study findings. If you're interested, it's on GFEMS website. But for now, I will tell you that we found 11% of children aged 12 to 17 in Napak district have experienced CSEC in the last year. There are no similar studies using any methods to give us a comparison for this prevalence rate. So this was a really unique study and the first of its kind, really, in Uganda. We found no statistically significant difference in the prevalence of CSEC by gender or by age group. In the example I showed you, the questions, you heard the child being asked whether they have been ridiculed or put down by their caregivers. And in fact, 1/3 of children answered in the affirmative that yes, they have been ridiculed or put down by their caregivers. We also found that 1/3 of children keep secrets from their caregivers. Our next steps are to repeat this same study in early 2022. This time we plan to collect user feedback more systematically. And we also plan to do cognitive testing of this module. We would like a better sense of what children are hearing when they hear the questions, how they understand them. And we would also like their feedback more broadly on on the module, on pushing the buttons. We'd like to understand how it differs for 12-year-olds compared to 17-year-olds. And so we will have a chance in this follow-up to collect some of that information. We may also do some quantitative testing of the self-administered module versus interviewer-administered, but that's still to be planned and discussed. Thank you very much.
Feel free also to follow us on social media. So you can connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. There are various updates that will come. But also, as I said at the start, we will follow up with an email. In that email, we will have the presentation that the team, the ICF team has just made. And then we'll also link to the video recording for this. So if we were moving a little too fast, you'll be able to catch up in the video recording. You can use subtitles on YouTube and things like that to help make sure you're able to follow through everything, as well as links to some of the key concepts from SurveyCTO that the team used in setting this up.